Alright, welcome back to Front Yard Studios on a porch somewhere in Davis County. It's not my typical routine of doing Freedom Fridays, but um, there's been a lot of stuff that's come up. And one thing in particular that's very disturbing was a recent interview with Joe Rogan. Okay, now rewind the clocks a little bit. We're coming into the election between Trump and Biden, and all of a sudden the New York Post drops this bombshell October surprise story about how Hunter Biden left his laptop sitting in a computer repair shop, and basically it was there long enough that it became abandoned property, and the computer store owner um, turned some of this information over. And on the computer, more shocking than anything was, aside from the snorting crack off of the back of a stripper in Las Vegas or doing meth and all these other things, there's a lot of stuff on there, information that pertained to Hunter Biden's $1 million ventures globally, where he was going out and seizing on opportunities that only came to him because Daddy-O was a vice president um, when most of this occurred. And a lot of stuff in addition to the blatant criminal acts that were recorded in video and audio form on this computer of Hunter's misdeeds. Um, it was very damning to some of the statements that Joe had made about not being involved in his son's business activities. And this actually kind of turned the tide to naming Joe Biden as the big guy. And there was a lot of different things, between a powerful billionaire in Mexico, to his shenanigans, being a executive on a board of a Ukrainian energy company. All these odd things going on, and it basically made Joe Biden, well, it didn't make him, it exposed him as the liar he is. It exposed the corruption of the Biden crime family, and it exposed the corruption of people using political office and their affiliation with those in political office to make millions of dollars, essentially working as a foreign agent. And of course, Hunter Biden was not registered as a foreign agent, which some of these things that he was doing would require. Okay, so New York Post drops the story, and immediately the New York Post gets the story deep sixed, and nobody's going to see it because it's very damning. Obviously, would have had at least a potential for a significant number of swing voters to turn their backs on Joe Biden and either refrain from voting or voting for the opponent, Donald Trump. So, if you remember correctly, it's been a while back, and unfortunately, a lot of American voters have very short-term memories, spans when it comes to voting and holding those in elected office accountable. Um, but there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or so self-proclaimed or industry acclaimed security experts and cyber threat experts, and they all signed onto this letter that was put out, just kind of justifying how this story got deep six, and saying this has got Russian collusion fingerprints all over it. And, well, fast forward to today, and unless you're being extremely intellectually dishonest with yourself, you know that the fact of the matter is it was Hunter's laptop, and it had some very compelling and damning evidence and information on it. Um, so, after all this is done, the election cycle happens. Joe gets in, and then kind of quietly, the experts and the authorities in charge of what went on here kind of quietly release, yeah, actually, this is Hunter's laptop. It wasn't a Russian plant. The KGB didn't come over here and set this up with the intention of throwing an election. So where that takes us, that's really important, is Mark Zuckerberg. He goes on Joe Rogan recently. He does an interview, and he talks about exactly that, the story of the laptop, and how that story got deep sixed. And it's really important to hear what he had to say. So, without further ado, we'll go into this interview with Joe Rogan and Mark Zuckerberg.
Of what just happens on our platform.
How do you guys handle things when they're a big news item that's controversial? Like there was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New
Yeah,
York
we had that
Post.
too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter. I mean, basically, the background here is the FBI. I think basically came to us, some folks on our team. It was like, hey, um, just so you know, like you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. So our protocol is different from Twitter's. What Twitter did is they said you can't share this at all. We didn't do that. What we do is we have if something is reported to us as potentially misinformation, important misinformation, we also have this third party fact checking program because we don't want to be deciding what's true and false. And for the, I think it was 5 or 7 days when it was basically um, being determined whether it was false, um, the distribution on Facebook was decreased, but people were still allowed to share it. So you could still share it, you could still consume it.
So when you say the distribution is decreased,
It got shared.
how does that work?
It basically the ranking in newsfeed was a little bit less, so fewer people saw it than would have otherwise. So it definitely,
By what percentage?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's meaningful. But I mean,
It's meaningful. Of course, he doesn't know the percentage, but it's meaningful.
basically, a a lot of people were still able to share it. We got a lot of complaints that that was the case. Obviously this is a hyper political issue, so depending on what side of the political spectrum, you either think we didn't censor it enough or censored it way too much.
Right.
But we weren't sort of as black and white about it as Twitter. We just kind of thought, hey, look, if the
So, in keeping with trying to keep this video short, I'll end it there. But it's definitely something to go pull up. You can readily find this interview on YouTube, and it's disturbing because any political leanings of an agency, especially of a law enforcement agency, especially the FBI, should be apolitical and absolutely neutral politically. How if it took Robert Mueller how many months to do an investigation on the quote unquote first Russian collusion nonsense that they pulled on Trump, then how could they, in a matter of days, with a straight face, and all of these experts that signed on to this letter saying that they highly doubt the authenticity of it, and it was probably a Russian attempt to overthrow an election, and it was all made up. They sure came to a determination on that laptop really fast. And this isn't a story. This wasn't a dossier. This was physical, tangible laptop and the evidence on it. Um, and yet they sure very quickly manifest that they thought that it was uh, damning in terms of the Russian government using this to throw a U.S. election. Okay, so that's one thing. But the other thing is they have no business being political and deciding and being the filter for which stories the American citizen gets to hear and which ones they don't. I mean, this is something straight out of a Gestapo playbook, KGB playbook. This is the FBI and the DOJ becoming a political arm for for one particular party, and it's very plain to see which party that they're playing favors for. And this goes way back. You know, everybody everybody says, well, oh, how do you doubt the sincerity of the FBI, and how dare you call them into question? Well, the FBI has a storied history in doing things that are less than I guess we could use the word moral or accurate if you didn't want to throw it in a moral category. Um, but people certainly need to know about this, and so educate yourselves on the subject. Look up the interview, listen to it, and ask yourself, is this the kind of FBI you want? And even if you are Democrat leaning and you think Joe Biden is the greatest thing since sliced bread, um, are you okay with a politically involved DOJ, FBI, if the shoe is on the other foot? Because if the answer is no, then there needs to be some kind of a consensus that this nonsense has to stop, and it has to stop now. But having said all that, I will just leave you that and let you kind of go do some of your own research and dig into it. But certainly a story worth looking at, no matter which side of the political spectrum you come from. So until next time, we'll catch you again on the Front Porch Studio.